This is a short introductory slide presentation that sets the stage for what we're going to be looking at in the lab for ESM 102. So the lab is going to focus on the beneficial application of technology to reduce human impact. And in lecture and in the reading, you've read about this relationship with the impact is related to the population, the amount of consumption, and the technology that's used. We're going to explore this more, but in the lab there's going to be a specific thread about looking at reducing the impact by using the appropriate technologies. So consumption has two types of impact. One is, say, consumption of a resource, reducing the available resource. Like if you have water from a limited source, you're pumping from underground wells, something like that, or burning fossil fuels. There's a limited amount of that. So that reduction is what we often think about. But there's also a lot of side effects from consumption. You might deplete the stream flow of a stream and lead to injury of fish. This is what happens a lot in Oregon streams. Or you might be adding heat to a stream and injuring the fish. So it's more like a side effect. And we have these emissions of pollution from fossil fuels like CO2, and then there's also the smaller, lower concentrations, but of toxic chemicals in pollution from fossil fuels like mercury and sulfate, those sorts of things. So these are these side effects that we'd have to pay attention to, and that's part of the impact from consumption. So in the course and in this lab, we're going to look at water and energy, and this is just an introduction to this. But if you just look at water consumption for the whole United States, you can see about 40% of the water consumption is for agriculture, about 40% is for thermoelectric production, like at power plants, 12% in the public, only 6% is for industrial uses, and only 1% is from domestic use. So we're going to be looking at what your own use is in your own home or apartment, and you realize that's only all of people put together, just what they use in their homes is only like 1%. So again, we're going to want to expand that back out and see what's the overall effect of your water consumption. Similarly, energy consumption. We have residential and commercial is only 10%, and about 1% is for internet servers of all the energy. So that's like an important thing to remember if you spend all your time on Facebook and email and D2L, of course. And the other important part about energy consumption was what were the sources. 73% come from fossil fuels. This is in the United States. 9% from nuclear, and only 8% from renewables. So the impact is heavily based on not only how much is consumed, but where that came from. In this impact, it's what technology was used. Was it fossil fuel technology? Was it nuclear? Was it renewable? So we could increase the amount of renewables and decrease the overall impact. Okay, so other impacts that we would want to talk about under water consumption, I mentioned stream flow depletion. We have water pollution, which is a type of use. We have shifting ecosystems. In many countries, they move water that's water-rich areas in one part of the country to the water-poor areas of other parts of the country. We see this in the American West, and it's going on in China now in a very large scale. So this shifts the ecosystems. And then there's others, and this would be an interesting thing to discuss. And in energy consumption, again, there's pollution, indoor pollution. We're going to see that's a big impact of cooking with wood is indoor pollution and the respiratory problems it causes. There's social structures that depend on energy, travel and communication, all those things that are part of our societies around the world depend on some source of energy. And then there's, again, other impacts. And what are those other impacts? Well, this is an important role for scientific studies. So we're going to use a scientific method to look at what are the side effects of using water consumption or energy consumption. And the point about science is that it's rigorous and it follows up the leads and follows up what's unknown. So if we just went through and did an accounting, and we're going to talk about that in the lecture portion, did an accounting of water consumption, we say, what do we know about water and how can we track where it goes? Okay, that's one aspect that's very useful. But if we take a scientific approach, we'd say, well, what do we know about water consumption, and then what questions do we still have, and what information will we need to get to answer those questions? So that's what's going to be demonstrated through this thread in the lab section, is to be looking for those unintended consequences and the other effects that could be so important. Okay, so just to remind you, some people don't have enough water or energy, and I think I'm a little I have these numbers here referenced, but in the lecture section I use like a different set of numbers, so I don't have to check that. But for right now, just take it that I'm a little bit confused on this. But there's a lot of people. 1 billion people don't have access to sufficient drinking water, or it's polluted, and nearly 3 billion people cook over wood stoves, and so these are huge numbers. So if we're going to address how to clean up water and make it more available to people, and how to reduce pollution and deforestation that comes from wood stoves, this can be a major beneficial impact of using different technologies, and that's going to really be what we're going to try to address in this lab over this winter term. So this is why we can look for appropriate technologies, and I'm going to use that word very broadly, but it's innovations that can help people. And you see in this picture here, there's a great innovation, which was making water barrels that have a spindle on them, so people can roll them from a good water source. They can roll quite a bit more water in one trip, and they aren't hurting their backs, and they're not making little children carry it. So this very simple innovation is an example of appropriate technology that gets clean water to people. We have other examples of using clean and renewable energy sources, and the point is to minimize negative impacts, and these might be useful for developing regions that don't have the infrastructure, sustainable communities. Some of these renewable energy might be employed in sustainable communities, and also we're seeing a lot of interest in these sustainable, low-impact, localized technologies for disaster preparedness or the response to disasters. So that's sort of a quick overview of what we're trying to do with this term, and what you're going to do is go through the rest of the unit.